Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is an educational, research, and human rights nonprofit devoted to commemorating the more than 100 victims of communism around the world and to pursuing the freedom of those still living under totalitarian regimes. Now, 100 million victims. I'm not about to doubt that, so don't worry. But that still is a really big claim. Substantial claims always need substantial evidence. The only source conducted on this claim stems from the Black Book of Communism, Crimes, Terror, Repression. Before I continue further, I need to make an example so a problem can be understood. Let's say that NASA built a new telescope that can see further than the previous one. Do scientists A. make guesses on what they will see and then look to prove themselves right? Or B. look into the telescope first and then label and define what can be observed? Scientific epistemology would have us go with B. To do the former would be to have a cognitive bias. When something is not known, it is unscientific to make up things where there is no reason to believe, and then to follow through with proving yourself right. With that out of the way, let it be known that part of the group of authors who knew Stefani Korotis stated that he was obsessed with reaching the 100 million goal. Other authors, like Jean-Louis Margolin, accused Stefani of sloppy and biased scholarship with exaggerated totals. Margolin also rejected the comparisons made between communism and Nazism. It has also been known that Korotis' desire to make the 100 million victims claim made him attribute to deaths of Nazis in World War II, anti-Semitic white army fighters, and Tsarist officers who oversaw genocidal programs against Jews in its list of victims of communism. From time and time again, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation has used this biased and inaccurate book to fearmonger people against looking into the ideology themselves. It shouldn't have to be explained why a corporate and government-backed organization have a gain in spreading anti-communist propaganda. The next time you hear of 100 million deaths, be sure to note that the book that claim comes from literally has authors who admit the bias and exaggerations. When it comes to the human language, words might have more than one meaning. So when it comes to politics, it's always important to make definitions clear before discussing political theory and concepts. A quick examination of videos produced by the VOC has laid out a definition for communism and socialism. To them, socialism is the desire for equality and equal wages. This comes from their video titled Socialism is Slavery, where they depict coins entering people's hands when discussing equality. They then try to answer how this concept of equality is achieved by saying that it requires a government controlling where people work, what wages they have, what conditions they are in, and the ownership of private property and resources. Their idea of socialism seems to be a skewed mix of state capitalism and Nordic socialist welfare states. Their criticism of controlling wages, conditions, private property, and resources is ironic, however, since these things are controlled anyway under capitalist nations like the United States. Why is this definition important? Because this group calls itself the Victims of Communism, and yet, when it has the opportunity to define it, it chooses to make a misnomer connection of state capitalism and Nordic socialist welfare states with penal labor systems in the Soviet Union, alleged persecutions in Cuba, and a lack of equality in Venezuela. This is fundamentally an incorrect correlation because the Soviet Union was ideologically Leninist, so was Cuba. And Venezuela is a nation where people are given wages, exploited of their surplus value, divided between a working class and a class of profit-driven property owners, which makes Venezuela a capitalist nation in practice. None of this has to do with the VOC-defined socialism. In a video they made titled Why Anti-Communism is Nonpartisan, communism is defined as a single-party dictatorship. This contradicts their previously established definition, and yet these videos were uploaded relatively around the same time. Since this group calls itself the Victims of Communism but fails to recognize definitions of socialism, such as Leninist socialism, it has to be assumed that they are using the terms socialism and communism interchangeably. For an organization so against an ideology, they both fail to deliver a consistent argument, fearmonger with a misinformed source, and their definitions do not match the definitions of communism and socialism that the nations they oppose define them as. Misinformation, fearmongering, and inconsistencies aside, surely the victims of communism come from good faith since they declare what they consider a good aim? Unfortunately, This is not the case. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation was founded in 1994 by Lee Edwards, Lev Dobriansky, and Zbigniew Brezezinski. Lev is a Ukrainian nationalist who also founded the Native Captive Nations Committee in 1959, which had a co-chair named Yaroslav Stetsko. Yaroslav was a Nazi collaborator who led the fascist organization of Ukrainian nationalists in the Anti-Bolshevik bloc of nations, which worked with Hitler in the genocidal destruction against communism and other people. The aforementioned founder, Brezezinski, was the primary organizer of the Trilateral Commission that was criticized by Noam Chomsky in the Crisis of Democracy.
Elites were concerned about what they called a crisis of democracy. It's a study, the only book-length study published by the Trilateral Commission, and it represents the more or less liberal internationalists from the three major centers of modern capitalism, the United States, Western Europe, and Japan, hence trilateral. Well, the crisis is that during the 1960s, large groups of people who are normally passive and apathetic began to try to enter the political arena to press their demands, and that's a crisis which has to be overcome. The naive might call that democracy, but that's because they don't understand. The sophisticated understand that that's a crisis of democracy. The American spokesman, again Samuel Huntington, wrote in his report that Harry Truman had been able to govern the country with the cooperation of a relatively small number of Wall Street lawyers and bankers. In those days, there was no crisis of democracy. Things were working just right. But in the 1960s, you got all this turmoil. I mean, young people and women and, labor. I mean, all kinds of weird people who were supposed to be sitting quietly in the corners began to get involved and caused this crisis. I mean, the same crisis that arose in the 17th century and that repeatedly arises when people begin to try to take advantage of the formal opportunities that exist. Among the terrible things that were happening during the 60s causing this crisis, they said, was that you had this group of people who they called value-oriented intellectuals, people who were concerned with things like truth and justice and all that sort of nonsense. But you had these value-oriented intellectuals, and they were doing all sorts of horrible things like delegitimizing the institutions that are responsible for the indoctrination of the young, like schools and universities. Remember, this is an internal discussion, so they kind of let their hair down. Their general proposal at the end of all of these lengthy and thoughtful discussions was that what we need is more moderation in democracy to mitigate the excess of democracy and to overcome the crisis. In plain terms, what that means is that the public has to be reduced to their proper state of apathy and obedience and driven from the public arena if democracy is to survive.
The Commission has been accused of promoting a global consensus among the international ruling classes to manipulate affairs to the interests of the financial and industrial elites under their trilateral umbrella. It doesn't stop there with Brezezinski, though. He was a national security advisor who played a major role in the Soviet-Afghan War. He supported extremist groups such as the Mujahideen and Operation Cyclone, including the funding and support of numerous individuals in Afghanistan that would later hold connections to those who orchestrated the 9/11 attacks in the U.S. The last founder, Lee Edwards, is the lesser of the three evils, a commentariat member that assisted the founding of the Young Americans for Freedom group in the 60s. Edward also took part in the right-wing think tank Heritage Foundation, which supported the Iraq War and the Guantanamo Bay torture camp. The Heritage Foundation also fights against climate change and denounces critical race theory funded by Mobil, Chase Manhattan Bank, General Motors, and Pfizer, among others. With all of this, the aforementioned NCNC acquired the funds to transform into what it is today, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, allowed by the Friendship Act of 1993 that was signed by Bill Clinton. This act details comparisons between the Holocaust and the communist ideology, deeming communism a tyranny as well. By doing so, they are minimizing the Holocaust, demonizing the greatest threat to fascism that is communism, and mourning the deaths of Nazis and Nazi collaborators. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation fails to recognize the importance communism has held in the fight against fascism and Nazism around the world, despite claiming to be against totalitarianism. For instance, communists around the world traveled to Spain to protect the Republic against a fascist coup. The Soviet Union crushed Nazis on the Eastern Front during World War II, and according to the French in the 40s, contributed to the war the most. It was Italian communists who captured Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy and ally of Hitler, who used his corpse as a piñata in the streets. The communists in Yugoslavia had one of the largest and most effective popular uprisings against fascists. French communists played a critical role in the effort to resist Nazi occupation. Korean and Chinese communists fought wars of liberation against the Japanese Empire, and East Germany made extensive efforts to erase Nazism from the country, while West Germany actively let former Nazi members into positions of power. This uncritical condemnation of communism downplays the horrible atrocity of the Holocaust, an insult to all its victims, and erases the essential role that communism plays in defeating fascism, where liberals and capitalists otherwise benefit. From the Jewish Currents article written by David Kotz, he says, and I quote, "Within the mythology of East European nationalists, particularly but not exclusively in the Baltics and Western Ukraine, where there was massive local participation in the actual killing of Jews, usually by shooting at local pits rather than deportation to faraway camps, the bogus moral equivalence of the Holocaust has been, from the time of the actual massacres, the myth that the Jews were all communists and got what they deserved because communism was every bit as genocidal as Nazism. Hence, what the Jews called the Holocaust is a kind of opposite and equal reaction to the first genocide, the crimes of communism." End of quote. The double genocide theory is supported in many Eastern countries, leading to the minimization of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism against Jews, and a glorification of fascism. Kotz also notes that one major symptom of the revisionism underway in Eastern Europe is the rehabilitation of Nazi collaborators as national heroes on the grounds that they were anti-Soviet. This can be seen with the Ukrainian Canadian Congress UCC, which has directly praised fascist figures, according to historian Per Anders, who ruled that Paul Grod, a member of the Tribute of Liberty's board of directors and another Victims of Communism participant, paid tribute to the veterans of the Waffen-SS Galician and remembered its fallen, who perished fighting for the freedom of their ancestral Ukrainian homeland. When the president of the Canadian Society of Veterans of the Waffen-SS Galician died that year, the UCC claimed that he will be remembered as a hero of Ukraine who fought for her independence. To conclude, it is groups like these, who of which pretend to be acting in good faith, but in reality have many gains to make by doing so. By fear-mongering against communism, they prevent people from looking into it. By failing to acknowledge communism's significance against fascism, they're indirectly supporting fascism. By citing a biased book, they are spreading misinformation. With dishonesty towards communism, they are disallowing critical and productive thinking that the ideology deserves in proper political discourse. And, by following the double genocide and horseshoe theories, they are inevitably creating the conditions of Holocaust minimization, anti-Semitism, and the indirect support of fascism and Nazism. My advice: it is important to be critical and seek a proper understanding of something before making opinions on it. It's tempting to immediately agree with groups like ones that call themselves victims of communism, but be cautious and analytical when observing such groups. Communism is an ideology that opposes capitalism and the status quo, which in turn opposes the corporate-funded anti-communist organizations who profit off this fear-mongering. When buying into the victims of communism, you'll become a victim of the VOC. This has been the VOC rabbit hole. They're not what you think. If you liked this video or learned something new, give it a like. If you didn't, then leave a dislike. Subscribe for more content like this.